All right, this Tim Cain. Are you above average? I like to think so, but I'm pretty average in size. I don't know what this is about.
Hi, everyone. It's me, Tim.
Hi, Tim.
Are you above average? Let's talk about that.
What do you
Today, I
mean?
want to talk about whether or not you think you are above average at something.
This is a good one. This is a good test of not just being humble, but being confident as well, right? So there's almost this issue if you're overconfident, right? Your ego is taking control of you, and you are an egotistical asshole. Not great. Not good for a team, not good for you. But there's also the other side where you can't realize your own abilities and your own strengths. And in that case, you often have probably struggle with motivation, with taking the first step, challenging yourself, right? Because you don't think you're capable of succeeding at it. There is a middle ground here, and there's a it's a really difficult line to ride. I think that I struggle with riding that line well. Sometimes I get a little overconfident. Sometimes I don't think I'm capable of doing something that I probably can do. Too much modesty when you're good at something can keep you down. Yeah, it can. It can. And I think I struggle with that because I'm afraid of being egotistical. I was that way before, especially when I started as a junior. Horrible. Horrible things it does to you, horrible things it does to the people that you work with and the people that um, want to team up with you. It's absolutely horrible. And so I kind of maybe overcompensated by being a bit too modest sometimes. When I do have like 10 years in the industry, I kind of know what I'm doing with design. I don't know everything. I never will know everything. But I'm better than I sometimes think I am.
Like, are you good at really, really good at this thing? Better than most other people. So let's set aside imposter syndrome. I have a whole video on that.
I think we saw that one.
I'm not talking about those times where you feel like, oh no, someone's going to find out that I'm terrible and fire me. A lot of people I've worked with and a lot of people I read on forums think they're an above average game developer. I mean, they seriously think, compared to all other game developers out there,
I'm
I'm way better.
I'm kind of average or below
It's
average.
interesting because I've worked with a lot of game.
I will say this in my own defense. There is a very big difference between being a specialist and being a generalist. And I think that generalists can struggle with sometimes not feeling very good because they can't do things almost as well as the pure specialist. But if you were to take the pure specialist and say, okay, now you need to make your own game with a smaller team, they won't have enough general knowledge to be a boon. And the vice versa is the same too. The generalist is going to have a lot of good knowledge about how to do a little bit of everything and is oftentimes specialized into one field, right? Like I'm a game designer, but I'm kind of a generalist game designer. I've done a little bit of everything. I feel more confident with systems from the technical perspective, but I can also do some AI design. I can also do some programming. I can also do some level design and level art stuff. Because I've had to, and that's what makes me valuable to indie teams or double A teams where they can't afford to hire 100 people to specialize in every little thing that they need to handle. You have to wear multiple hats. So sometimes if I were to go to like a triple A team, I might worry that I'm not specialized enough to compete with people on the same level. But I know that if I apply to an indie team, that's where not only do I want to go, but I am more valuable because they can see all the different things that I've had my paws in over time, and that's exactly what they're looking for.
Developers. And the politest thing I can say is that isn't true. The nicest thing I can say, and I'll talk about it, is I've met people who are really good at some things and really bad at other things. And they don't like to even think about those things they're bad at. And because they don't think about it, they think, well, I'm average everywhere, but I'm really above average at this.
That's ego. That's ego talking. I mean, it's okay to be bad at things. You're not going to be the best at everything in game dev. I can't 3D model for shit. I can't do anything artistic. I can't draw. I just don't, it doesn't visualize for me. Like I have a great imagination. I can imagine an amazing world and fantasy realm and everything. But if you ask me to, okay, now take that scene and translate it to paper, I just can't. Like, I can tell you the systems that'll be in the game because that's what I do. I love thinking about, okay, here's how the trading works and how, money is made and how the player is going to be able to haggle and do all these things. Artistic side, I suck ass. People naturally want to do what they're good at. Yeah. Yeah. But there is, I think, an issue with eco where people think, well, I'm really good at this thing, but I can do this other thing too, no problem. It's like, yeah, but you can't. You can't.
There's a really common
I like writing dialogue, but I
statistic
suck
that
at
gets
it.
thrown around about American drivers. Depending on what study you see, it's somewhere between 80 and 90% of United States automobile drivers think that they're above average. The only way that can be true is if all those people are really good at driving, and then there's like 10-15% of people driving who are so awful, so down here that everybody else can be up here and they can drag them down to
Well, yeah, because if that many people thought they were above average, they would be the average, right? Like at that point, if that statistic is true and all those people are above average, then they would be average, right? If everybody is super, then no one is, right? From Incredibles.
average. And let me just tell you, that is not the case. It is not the case. Most people are average drivers. That's what average is. Yep. Well, actually, that's what median is. But you know what I'm talking about. I think the same is true about employees. But really what we need to do is we need to break it down into individual tasks. Like maybe some people are really good at obeying street signs, but they're not good at reacting to sudden changes in driving conditions. They're not good at driving in snow. They're not good at parallel parking. Are they still a good driver?
That's a really good point. Yeah. There are, like, I'll just say like game design because I know game design. I've met game designers who are excellent at solving problems, at problem solving, right? But their documentation skills suck ass. And you could argue that maybe that doesn't make them a good designer because designers need to communicate, and if you can't communicate well, then you suck as a designer, right? Hot take. Not really. But, some are better at like making flow chart. Again, this is kind of the same thing. If you aren't good at making flow charts, you're not good at communicating. But either way, like you have better strengths. Maybe you aren't as good as somebody else at making flow charts, but you're better at documenting. Like me, generally speaking. But vice versa, I might have, somebody that I'm working with who's really good at making flow charts, but terrible at making documentation. It's like we can augment each other. It's like, okay, I'll write it up. Let's talk. You can make the flow charts, shove them into the document. That'll save me a lot of time and frustration. And then I can write the documentation, and we can review each other's work and see how it, fits to the standards of what we're trying to make. That's what a team is for. It's to augment each other. You're not supposed to be the hero of the team. The team is the team. The team is the hero if it's working properly. It's one unit that is moving towards a common goal.
I have a whole video about talking about Troika having a flat hierarchy. And I'll sum it up here. When Troika started in 1998, we hired everyone and we paid everyone the same salary, regardless of where they were in the hierarchy.
I'd be curious to see how that worked.
The owners down to the newly hired people, and regardless of what they were, whether they're an artist, a programmer, a designer. Wow, that was a huge, huge mistake.
Okay.
I go into way more detail on the video, so watch the video, link below if you want to know. But
I'm curious about that one, actually.
Not everybody we hired contributed the same to the game.
Yeah, and that will breed a lot of problems. Like, it's not that you should pay people unfairly, right? But that by paying everybody the same, you are potentially paying people unfairly, just in a way that you wanted to try and avoid, right? You didn't want to pay the juniors a little bit and the seniors a ton. But you do that because they have more responsibility. Like the juniors are not expected to come into work and do these crazy hours, and they're not meant to be responsible for the end result and how it fits into the game. They're not the one that's supposed to be on those calls spewing out expert professional knowledge after, decades of experience. They're meant to do their tasks. Their thought process is limited to a much smaller scope. And it doesn't mean that they're not capable of more, but that this is where you start out, right? Everybody's got to start out as a beginner in some way. You have to be truly above average to do it all yourself, and most people are not that good, and that is okay. Yeah, it is. And I give that harsh reality lesson to a lot of indie developers. It's like, you cannot make a game on your own. Stop trying to do it. Unless you are God's gifted game developer. And I hate that people look at Manor Lords and whatever that developer is saying is like, oh yeah, I'm a sole developer. No, you're not. And your credits have a shit ton of people in there that probably don't like you saying that because it diminishes their efforts on your game. Stop saying it. There's nothing you can gain from it except boosting your own ego, in my opinion. And the game needs to be made like the narrative directors, etc. are important, but someone has to do the coding, which is probably more man hours. Yeah, it's like it's all difficult in its own way. You specialize and you do the things you like because that's what you're good at and what you've trained for, and that's what everybody else is doing. You're no better than anyone else in the team in this general perspective of you are doing the thing that you like and are good at, ideally. Your World was the only solo dev indie game I know that was great, but it took him over 7 years and he messed up in the end because he has nobody to bounce ideas off of. Yeah, I hate that. But I hate being the single designer on a game with nobody to bounce ideas off of. It's tunnel vision. No game designer is going to spit out the best ideas. You think Hideo Kojima, as great as he is at making some game systems, do you think he can write good stories? Not really. They're just kind of eh. Like some of the characters are memorable, most of them aren't, and they don't really make a lot of sense. But he's good at systems. He's good at systems. And I can respect him for that. But again, one thing too, if you work on like Cube World for 7 years, sure, it's a great game. A lot of developers work on their amazing idea for like 5+ years, sometimes even up to 10 years or more, and then it doesn't sell because their game idea just wasn't that good to begin with, or they didn't have enough people to contribute specialized knowledge to actually make the game better than just an average game that took a long time for one person to make. Or by the time it comes out, that game has already been done. Like those systems that were at that point in time, maybe revolutionary, were already done by a bunch of other studios within the time that you were developing your game. Now your game is just average. And you don't want to have an average game. Not as an indie developer, especially not as a sole developer.
For example, let's just take programming, which I was doing a lot of. Not all of the programmers wrote code that was as efficient or as low in bugs or wrote it as quickly or could write a variety of code. In other words, they could write better code in more areas than just one type. So they were a good non-specific. They were a good generalist programmer. That was not true for all of them. Same thing happened with art. Same thing happened with design. We couldn't continue to pay everybody the same amount because it was painfully clear that was unfair to the people who were contributing way more than average.
The secret here is something that I think you just kind of learn with experience or through mistake, right? And this is not me. I'm not going to enlighten you here, but maybe some people need to hear it. And it's something that I need to constantly remind myself every fucking day that I wake up. The most successful people, and let's just use game dev as an example, the most successful coders, the ones who can write a lot, the ones who are very versatile, the ones who are really good at planning and breaking it down. Look at what they do. Look at how they speak to people and how they communicate and how they think of themselves. They're probably asking a lot of questions. They have no fear in saying, I don't know. How do you do this? Or I need help. And they're constantly absorbing knowledge from their peers and from other places. It's like the way that they got there is they started off as you. Let's just, I'm just gonna use you as an example. This general you person. They started off as we all started off, incompetent, unknowledgeable, scared, passionate, maybe interested, and they just kept making mistakes, learning from it, and applying those lessons to their future work. They never got wrapped up in their own ego of saying, okay, I can do this thing, so I'm going to stay in this small team where I'm the most knowledgeable. No, they probably left that team to go to some place where they were now the least knowledgeable person again, so that they can build up to that new height. That's one of the important things about switching companies. If you're the most knowledgeable person in the room or the most knowledgeable person in the company about something, you might want to seriously consider switching jobs or switching to a different company, to some place where if you're really like focus minded on becoming the best in the craft or the industry, you need to surround yourself with people that are better than you. It's as simple as that. And it's a tough thing to do. It's very difficult. But once you're surrounded by people that are better than you, if they have the right mindset, and oftentimes they will, where they'll want to teach you and share that knowledge, you can grow so much faster. I've worked at companies where I was, in certain cases of design, I was the most knowledgeable person in the company, and I was not very knowledgeable. So I was like, I can't learn here. I can't grow. I'm not doing anything to challenge myself, and the years go by, and I am stagnant. I can't learn from anything here. So I switch, and I surround myself by people who are better than me, or I challenge myself by jumping headfirst into things that I've never done before. Like Cauldron Chronicles, our game, it was the first time I've made an open world. It's the first time I've ever done that in Unreal. It's the first time I've ever built a level, used the landscape editor. These were new to me, and I'm really happy that I learned it. Yeah, you can't get anywhere in coding unless you really commit to it. Personally, I gave it up. I regret giving it up, but it's so hard to get back into motivation-wise. I can imagine, yeah. Truth is, you need to make something exceptional for it to stand out nowadays. It's not the early 2000s anymore. You're right, yeah. And that's just making it more difficult for solo developers, which already was like the most difficult thing you could do in game dev. Because now as a solo developer, it's not just that you are a solo developer making a game. Great, join the line of thousands of people that are doing the exact same thing or trying to. It's like, just don't bother with that. Stop trying to think that you can do everything yourself. I get that you want to in order to learn, but then accept that you're not probably going to make money from this. That this is being done to bolster your knowledge, not to become profitable. And the problem is where something that should have existed as this was attempted to exist as this. If you want it to be profitable, you need to market it. You need to know that there's a market, that there are people wanting your game. And it's really difficult to do that if you've never had to think about that, or you've never been in biz dev, if you've never had to do marketing or production or game design before, because game design focuses a lot on who is our market, how big is it, what is our golden standard player here? Are they, give them a name, give them a persona, what age are they, what occupation do they have? Why are they turning your game on after work and not someone else's? What are they looking for emotionally? And the more you think about that, the more you can find out, okay, I'm pitching to this market. They exist on this platform. The demographics are here. If it's young teenagers, like 12 to 16-year-olds, you're making some game. Where are they? They're on TikTok. They like short form content. They're using these buzzwords, these terms in school. Like, use those in your marketing and you can go viral. But I don't know, it's difficult to do, and you probably don't have the time to do it yourself if you're a solo developer. But that's what you need to do. So you need to hire a marketing team, or you need to hire a community manager. You need to work with somebody that can handle that aspect of the business while you focus on what you're good at. And just to note, Cauldron Chronicles, the game that I'm making, we intend to have 15 people full-time with some outsourcing and independent contractors. So right now I'm kind of making it alone. Now I have help with somebody with the potion combat, and he's been amazing, and I'm excited to work with him because I've never done combat design. I don't know what I'm doing. And I could jump into it, I could learn a lot, but I want to work with somebody who can then teach me what they know, and I can teach him what I know, and we can become better designers from that. It's hard to balance that stuff and not be cringe, though. Yeah, it is. I mean, I don't know if I would use it as an example for the best thing to do, making a game for 12 to 16-year-olds, but you can do it.
In some sense, too, it's unfair to the people who are contributing a lot less than average. But here's the thing: nobody, nobody likes being told that they're not as good as somebody else. Nobody.
Yeah.
That is a tough meeting to have. Also, even if you have evidence, even if you have,
There are ways to say that, though. There are ways to say it without saying it, right? Which is one of the things that like strike teams handle. And if you don't know, like strike teams in smaller dev teams, although I think larger companies do it too. Somebody can tell me if I'm wrong or right on that. Are smaller teams of maybe up to 10 people max, but usually a bit smaller than that, to handle a specific task or feature. And you pull people that can learn the most or that can teach the most. So if you say, okay, well, you're going to be working with this person who is really knowledgeable about it. You're going to be the feature owner. This unknowledgeable person is going to be the feature owner. You're going to help control the vision. They're going to augment you and feed you with knowledge and experience that they have. And when you all come out of it, you're going to come out a much stronger person, right? If you think of, as a business owner, employees as investments, you want your investments to grow and not be stagnant. Otherwise, what's the point? Why did you invest in them? So you take your, I won't say lowest performing employees, but you take your employees that need to augment their knowledge in other facets or to grow their knowledge by learning from like a more experienced designer, and you pair them up with them. You have them work closely and learn from them and get feedback, review, so that they can climb up to here too. And honestly, your designer is going to grow up a little bit too because he's now teaching somebody, and that's a great tool and bit of knowledge to have, is being able to teach people, have patience, have better communication ability with them to explain maybe potentially difficult concepts in a simple way. I promise you, if you're ever working on a game and a designer is using these complicated terms to sound fancy, they're shit. They're a shit designer. Get away. Warn somebody. That's a red flag. No game design concepts should be difficult or should require difficult terminology to explain. Game design is easy to explain. It just sometimes might take time. It might take going through multiple stages of why something is the way it is or why it can't be the way that you want it. But you should not be making up bullshit terminology that confuses people, especially your teammates. That's not good communication. That's bad communication.
irrefutable, objective evidence, they do not like it. Now, I've talked on this channel about what I've come to realize I'm bad at. Just to remind you, business development and character writing, especially dialogue writing, are the two that are top of my list.
I suck at dialogue too.
Despite that, people keep asking me for advice on those two things. And so whenever I do, I put a big caveat in front of it. But what I have to ask you is, are you honest with yourself about your strengths and weaknesses? Because in my experience, most people are not. If you think you're great at everything, you're not. You're not. Hate to rip that Band-Aid off. You're not.
All assholes.
If you try to back up and go, well, I'm a good generalist. Well, generalists aren't great at everything. They're just good at a lot of things. And there are a few things they're not good at. But because they're generalists, you can usually find a specialist who's way better at something that they can do.
Yeah, as I said, yep.
Depending on what kind of game you're making, you do need a specialist.
Yep.
You're making a multiplayer game, you need a network specialist. You're making,
100%.
especially if you're making an MMO where there's going to be thousands of people connected.
One of the first people you hire when you're making an MMO is somebody to handle the server architecture. That needs to be handled from day one. No excuses. If you don't have that from day one, you're going to be setting yourself up for a lot of pain and a lot of tech debt. And you need somebody to handle that, not just because of the specialized knowledge, but because that's somebody with specialized knowledge that also is sitting on it full time, optimizing it, handling security, handling the handshakes, interactions, making sure that the code is clean and you're building a solid foundation that isn't going to warp into some massive exploit later on, right? Because MMOs need to be very, very, very stable. Very stable. More so than a single player game where if you have a crash or you have a duplication bug, it's not going to ruin the player's experience too significantly. But God forbid, a duplication bug in an MMO is probably one of the worst fires that can ever be lit in your office. I don't want to imagine it.
Just fine.
Like, do you shut down? Do we shut down the servers? Do we do a rollback? But then players are gonna be pissed because their progression is gone. Do we allow it? Do we ban the people from it? I don't even want to think about it.
So even falling back and saying you're a generalist is not a way of saying, well, I'm above average. It's saying you're really good at a lot of things and then
Yeah,
probably bad at a few other things.
that's me. I'm a generalist.
This, by the way, I think is a source of, there are people I've worked with in the past who don't like working with me. Because guess what? I had to explain to them in excruciating detail why their code or their design or whatever it is they did wasn't as good as they thought it was. And guess what? That's just something a manager, if you're ever in a manager position, you're going to have to do that. You're going to end up with somebody who, they may not be a bad employee, but there may be something that they're bad at. And guess who has to explain it to them? You. You can't get around this. You can't kick the can upstairs. You can't, eventually you're going to be in a position where you have people who report to you. And not all of them are going to be great. And most of them aren't going to be great at everything. So you're going to have one of those uncomfortable meetings where you're like, yeah, you're not getting your stuff done fast enough, or the stuff you're turning in is really bad, or the stuff you're turning in isn't nearly as good as what your peers are doing, and we need to talk about it.
Wake up calls are challenging, though. I mean, there's a way that you can give a wake up call to a person that I think if you do it well and they get upset, that's on them, right? It's like, okay, this worked in your old company, but we require something a little bit different in our company. And there is some adaptation that is needed, right? Especially with design. It's not like code, right? Where code, I think, is a lot more strict with its. That's not a good word to use. It's a lot more rigid with its implementation between games. The way to handle certain functions is generally pretty similar between games. You're just going to have different inputs, different outputs, and maybe some different things being handled. You can't fake being a good coder. That's a good way to say it. With design, I mean, I've seen companies that prefer lengthy documents. I've seen companies that prefer just writing in Confluence, right? Or making just some notes and sending it over to other team members. Sometimes what is best is just different for each team. And as a designer, you have to adapt to that. It's like, okay, you guys don't like long documents, but on my previous job, I was writing long documents. So now I need to reformulate the way that I'm communicating the ideas and put denser ideas and pieces of information into one source, like a small Confluence document. Maybe they don't allow, I've seen this happen, they don't allow Confluence, because it's like section, subsection, right? And then you can do subsections of those sections. They don't allow that third piece to it, the subsections. They do main section, second section, and that's it. You can't go any deeper than that. They do that for like organizational purposes. Well, now that changes the way that I'm organizing information into a feature, right? And so you have to adapt to that as a designer, and that's very difficult moving from company to company because the way that you've communicated with a previous team is going to be very different, or sometimes very different, from the way that you're communicating with a new team. And yeah, I'm not sure that art teams or coding teams have as significant of problems with that as the design team will.
So, you also may want to keep in mind that this is probably the source of some, not all, but some negative company reviews that you read are probably from employees who weren't very good at their job. And rather than accept that, they just like, I'm going to yell at the company when I get laid off or fired. I'm sure if you ever look at Yelp, I'm sure you can tell that some of those Yelp reviews are really being left by problem customers. They're just ridiculous in what they expected. They walk into a little mom and pop restaurant and they're like, I need all vegan, all gluten free, and vegan, and I don't even know what vegan means because I want cheese. and then they leave a bad review. So this happens with company reviews as
Fucking
well.
funny.
Many of them are valid. Some of them aren't. How do you filter those? I don't know. I wish I could have figured out how to filter stuff early on. One idea would be you have to prove you worked at a company in order to post, but most people don't want their actual names attached
Yep.
for retaliation. I doubt people would want their annual reviews attached, even if they were anonymized. So I don't know how you can filter a company review to get rid of the reviews by people who are just bad employees.
I'm not sure how you do that either.
And let me just state that some of the negativity that companies get is truly and 100%
Eugenics.
deserved. Just remember, it's one side. You're getting one side at those places. Just like my videos, and some of you have mentioned, are one side. They're my side. So,
Well, they can also be dated too. You know, it's like problems at companies can exist in a certain small time period. And it might be bad, but it might be like, okay, well, the company learned from that. So now your review of that time period that was bad is reflecting poorly on the company that has changed significantly since that point. And I don't know if there's a way to fix that, but you know, we put like review dates on there, right? So if I'm looking at reviews of a company that say, well, the CEO was shit, and this is from like 2016, it's like, well, it's 2024 at this point, and I've seen recent news that they have a new CEO, so this isn't valid anymore.
What is my recommendation? What's my TLDW? Too late. You watched. Just come to some sort of understanding and comfort that you are going to be average at some things, really good at other things, and bad at a few other things. This is just the way of the world. It's almost everybody who's out there. Yeah, there's a few people who are great at everything and a few people who are bad at everything, and you're probably not one of them. The thing here is you need to be honest. At the very minimum, be honest with yourself.
Yes.
I guarantee you that not just your job life, but your life in general will be a lot easier if you acknowledge these are things I'm not good at. I shouldn't do this. Whether it's, me paying someone to do plumbing in my house because I'm not good at that, to you just deciding this isn't a good job for me, it's not a good fit because I'm just not good at this. This is something that only you can figure out for yourself. People will tell you things. Sometimes what they're telling you is wrong. But if enough people tell you you're not good at something, maybe you're not good at it. Try to get better. But there are things I've learned that I just can't get better at. They're not a skill set that I can improve, or at least improve after decades of trying. So that's pretty much what I'm saying here. You can be above average at some things. You're probably going to be below average at others. Figure that out. Your life will be a lot easier once you understand yourself.
There's one of those 10 rules for life, right? Like, surround yourself with people that are good for you. And doing that in a team is also very important. I think a good team, there's a sign of it where if you say, hey, I don't know how to do this thing, they don't jump on you. They don't say, oh, we're going to fire you and find somebody else. They don't threaten that. They don't make fun of you. They say, oh, I know how to do that. I can teach you. That's a good team. And that's a team that will enable this constant growth of each other by saying, oh yeah, I recently watched a GDC talk about that. I'll share the knowledge with you. Or I will do a presentation on a day of going through how to implement this feature into the engine. And that way, even if I'm on vacation or if I leave to go do something else, you guys will know how to do it, right? Share that knowledge. Share that, because it's not, people don't want to replace you by having the knowledge that you have. They want to become better at what they do by knowing what you think when you're doing your job. That's why I like to shadow the coders or talk to artists. I suck at art. So what do? I spend a lot of time talking to artists so I can see what their general thought process is when I bring them a set of information, a set of blueprints for designing a system. What have I missed in my game design documents that they could have used to make better art? It's like, oh, well, I should have explained how I wanted a filter, maybe a post-process filter, and I didn't really think about that. I just said, well, the screen should be red on this, and it's like, well, what does that mean? Right on the sides, blood dripping down. Maybe it's not like a vignette or something. How do we explain this low health? How does it look? Get examples or explain it. Did you go to school for game design to get jobs in the industry? I did not go to school. I dropped out of high school. I am a middle school graduate at best, and unfortunately, they don't have that option when I select education on most places. So I kind of just lie and say that I have high school. Question did everything. What should I do to find the thing that? Okay, that's actually a good question. I mean, you might just be fucking around, but if you are shit at everything in game dev, you don't know where to start. Just pick the thing that you love doing, because at least then you'll have a lot of passion and drive for figuring out what you want to do. Hey, you also dropped out of high school recently? Did my GED or an inspiration? Yeah, I don't know. I dropped out of my senior year, I think. I never went back. It was boring. I didn't get my GED either. I was in a bad headspace at that time. I was very depressed, and I was like, you know what? Nah, boring. I'm gonna go play games because that's fun. And I did that for a couple years while also being depressed, and then I was like, you know what? Maybe I can become a game developer, even if I didn't go to school. And whole different story. You man, it was the same way. Love for you, man. It's a tough journey, but it feels good. It feels good that I'm self-taught in a lot of cases, although that's kind of a lie, right? I think it's not true. It's just I'm a self-starter. I don't like the term self-taught in a lot of cases because especially in game dev, you're not self-teaching yourself. You are learning from other sources, but you just didn't have a direct teacher in a lot of cases, I think. Like, you still watched, I don't know, game design talks, or you watched coding tutorials. You're not really self-taught. You're just a self-learner, I think, I guess. Learning on the job. Yeah, it's like learning on the job. I think that's the best way to put it. Learning on the job. Yeah. 100% agree. Well, another great video from Tim. I don't think I liked that previous one that he put. That's absolutely rude. An encumbrance. Like. There's the link in chat. Give him a like, give him a subscribe. Another great video. Tim, if you ever watch these, I hope you don't mind me making these videos, you reacting to you. I hope I'm providing some additional context or support, but you're also teaching me a lot, so, thank you so much for all the good stuff you do. If you're watching on YouTube, take care, and see you guys next time. Bye-bye, YouTube.